It says officials in some GOP-led states refuse to let Justice Department monitors into polling places. Says some Republican-led states say that they will block the Justice Department's election monitors from going inside polling places on election day, pushing back on federal authorities' decades-long practice of watching for violations of federal voting laws. Officials in Florida and Texas have said they won't allow federal election monitors into polling sites on Tuesday. And on Monday, Missouri filed a lawsuit seeking a court order to block federal officials from observing inside polling places. Texas followed with a similar lawsuit seeking to permanently bar federal monitoring of elections in the state. The Justice Department announced last week that it will be deploying election monitors in 86 jurisdictions across 27 states on election day. The Justice Department declined to comment on the moves by the Republican-led states, but filed court papers urging the judge to deny Missouri's request. First of all, let me ask you this. Why in the world are you doing 27 states and not 50? I think all 50 states should get election monitoring, don't you? Why are you only doing it for 27? It is election day, 2024. And look, a lot of people are talking about this all day today. And with those of us at independent media, it's like Christmas Day, right? It's like Christmas Day in a sense where you kind of feel like you're riding around in the neighborhood and you're looking at all the lights, or you're seeing some of the foolishness happen. You're like, oh, snap, that person looks like they're, got drunk off a little bit too much eggnog. You know what I'm saying? There, some fights, you see some drama. And with that being said, millions of Americans are in line right now at different polling places across the country. It is, the doors have swung open. People are going either to the paper ballots and bubbling the name, or they're going to the ballot box and they're, at the voting machine, picking out who they want. But some interesting things are going on across the country. And ultimately, some states are saying no to the federal government. They're saying you can't come in to the polling places. Let's take a look at it, shall we? When I saw this, I said, what? Gregory, what you doing?
The federal government is sending election monitors to polling locations across the country, but not here in Texas. Fox 26's Jade Fleury is live in West Houston to explain why.
Yeah, just so people don't get confused, poll workers and poll watchers, they're allowed here at the polling sites, but it's those federal poll monitors that are being asked by the state to stay away from polling locations.
We want a fair and secure election.
The federal government routinely sends monitors to polling locations across the country to keep an eye out for any violations of voting rights. The Department of Justice announcing it will send monitors to several states on election day. However, the Texas Secretary of State declined the offer.
States are free to decline federal oversight of voting locations these days. Texas and a couple of other states have declined to do so this year.
In a letter to the Department of Justice Friday, Texas Secretary of State Jane Nelson wrote to the DOJ saying the monitors aren't allowed inside state polling sites under state law.
We don't need any more federal intervention. There's no call for it.
You're going to tell the federal government and federal monitors they have no business monitoring a federal election?
Despite this.
What do you think? Because ultimately, my thing is if it were a state election, I mean, you're still part of the United States. So election monitoring should happen. to keep them honest, right? And yet you have states like Texas going, nah, you guys can't come in. You guys can't observe the validity and legitimacy of our election system. And I find it funny that we critique the elections of other countries, and yet they don't allow the federal government to come and observe. And it's like, would they be allowing Donald Trump's Justice Department to observe if it were Donald Trump that was in office and he had his attorney general? It's kind of interesting that they're doing this year. Let's continue.
The state's request Democratic leaders in Harris County putting in a request to the Department of Justice to bring in federal monitors to the polls.
We ask for the presence of the Justice Department here because Texas is one of the most voter restrictive states in the nation.
County Democrats argue that the Secretary of State's refusal to allow federal monitoring is an attempt at voter suppression, while Republicans counter that, saying the claim is unfounded.
I want voters to realize that all of the efforts by the state are designed to try and scare you into not voting.
So who is doing the voter suppression? The Democrats that are in charge of the election? It's not the Republicans. We're not in charge.
The fact.
Hang on. See, this is where the partisanship gets on my nerves. I'm going to give a very ice cold take here, but both Democrats and Republicans suppress voting. Both do. The Republicans may suppress voting through gerrymandering. They may limit polling places. You got the whole voter ID thing, which I honestly think, I think voter registration should be automatic. I think voter registration should be absolutely automatic. And everybody, people should only have to opt out. Or if they don't want to vote, they just don't vote, right? You shouldn't even really have to register. Like if you're a citizen over the age of 18, you should automatically just be registered, right? And if you want to vote, you can vote. If you don't, no, then don't, right? It's just easy as simple as that. But the thing is like, the Democrats are like, oh my God, the Republicans, they're suppressing your right to vote. And I'm like, what happened to the Democratic primary this year? Anybody want to take a guess? Because the thing is like, I don't remember an actual Democratic primary happening this year. In fact, you had a literal Texan that was running for president of the United States. Her name was Marianne Williamson. Did she get a shot at an actual primary this year? You go ahead and ask her. By the way, I'm not a Democrat and I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent, right? But as an outside observer, I saw Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson, Cenk Uygur all say that they wanted to run for president of the United States. And also RK Jr. at the time. They all wanted to run for president of the United States. They tried to go into the Democratic primary. They wanted the Democratic primary. And what did the Democrats say? They told them to kick rocks. They said Joe Biden is their nominee. And guess what happened? They replaced Joe Biden with Kamala Harris. And they said, this is our nominee. They knew Marianne Williamson, Dean Phillips, Cenk Uygur, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They knew that in a race to cognitive ability, Joe Biden was losing that race. And so they found it necessary to replace him. But the Democrats didn't want to. Why? Remember this. The Democratic Party is not a public institution. It is a private organization. I'm going to repeat myself. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party are not public, bureaucratic institutions. They are private organizations. The DNC and the RNC. Meaning that no matter what you say, they have the ability legally to choose whoever they want to be their nominee, no matter what. You can say, oh, we vote for this person or we want that person, and they can win all the votes that they want. They can win the entire shebang. They can get all the delegates. But at the end, it is the DNC and the RNC that says, this is who we want. They are by no means legally bound to democracy when it comes to their primaries, when it comes to their elections. So I want you guys all to remember that, because it was argued by Bruce Steva for the DNC lawsuit. The attorneys, the Becks, actually sued, and this lawsuit was actually submitted by Nico House. That they honestly just really wanted to get the money back to the people, but DNC was like, we don't have any obligation to actually favor the vote of all the people who are our members. So when it comes to voter suppression, I want you to remember that both major parties suppress votes. Neither one of them have clean hands in any of this. All right. Let's finish this up.
You have a little friction here between the federal and state government, I think is good. I think it shows that there's a check and a balance and something that's very important.
And despite the Secretary of State's request, Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia says that she spoke to the DOJ this morning and that those federal monitors are still en route to Harris County to be here during the election. However, it is unclear if they will be at the voting sites or if they will just be on standby in case anything arises. Reporting.
So let's dive a little bit deeper in this, shall we? So this is also local to me because I live in Florida. So let's get into this. It says officials in some GOP-led states refuse to let Justice Department monitors into polling places. Says some Republican-led states say that they will block the Justice Department's election monitors from going inside polling places on election day, pushing back on federal authorities' decades-long practice of watching for violations of federal voting laws. Officials in Florida and Texas have said they won't allow federal election monitors into polling sites on Tuesday. And on Monday, Missouri filed a lawsuit seeking a court order to block federal officials from observing inside polling places. Texas followed with a similar lawsuit seeking to permanently bar federal monitoring of elections in the state. The Justice Department announced last week that it will be deploying election monitors in 86 jurisdictions across 27 states on Election Day. The Justice Department declined to comment on the moves by the Republican-led states, but filed court papers urging the judge to deny Missouri's request. First of all, let me ask you this. Why in the world are you doing 27 states and not 50? I think all 50 states should get election monitoring, don't you? Why are you only doing it for 27? Just a little over half the country. It should be the entire country. It should not be limited to just red states or blue states. It should be the entirety. I don't know. Is it just me? Does that sound crazy? That I think that every single state should have federal monitoring? I don't know. It's just weird. And also, hang on. The purpose of the monitoring is just as important. The purpose of the monitoring really should be so that federal laws are not violated by the states. Because remember that whole states' right thing? States' rights to do what? Right? So ultimately, they should be held by that standard. But they can't come in? It's weird. It says the race between Democratic nominee Kamala Harris and Republican nominee Donald Trump is a dead heat, and both sides are bracing for potential legal challenges to vote tallies. The Justice Department election monitoring effort, a long practice under both Democrat and Republican administrations, is meant to ensure that federal voting rights are being followed. Here's a look at election monitors and the state's actions. So, who are election monitors? Election monitors are lawyers who work for the Justice Department, including in the Civil Rights Division of U.S. Attorneys' offices across the country. They are not law enforcement officers or federal agents. For decades, the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division has sent attorneys and staff members to monitor polling places across the country in both federal and non-federal elections. The monitors are tasked with ensuring compliance with federal voting rights laws. The Justice Department's Civil Rights Division enforces a number of statutes protecting the right to vote. That includes the Voting Rights Act, which prohibits intimidation and threats against those who are casting ballots or counting votes. And it includes the Americans with Disabilities Act, which mandates the election officials ensure people with disabilities have full and equal opportunity to vote. So, that being said, this ensures that people who look like me are not prevented from being able to go and cast our ballots based on our skin color. Or also people like me who may be disabled, who may need special provisions in order to be able to vote. You go to a polling place and you have to step up steps to get into that polling place. Where's the ramp for people who are mobility impaired? You have to make sure that it's ADA certified so that people who are disabled can get in there. And it may not just be people who need the ramp who are in wheelchairs. It could be people who are in walkers. It could be people who are in crutches. It could be people who are elderly or infirm that need to, walk up instead of stepping up on steps, right? It could be somebody that is normally able, but they're temporarily disabled because maybe they got into a car accident. Maybe they had to be in a wheelchair for a while, or maybe in crutches, but they wanted to come out to vote. What about the visually impaired, right? people who may need guidance to be able to vote. Maybe somebody needs an attendant with them because they may have dyslexia or trouble reading or something like that. They could have many other different ailments, right? So they could probably be able to exercise their constitutional right. Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, is disabled. Did you know that? He's in a wheelchair. And so I think somebody like him would be game to have federal elections officials to come in and look and make sure that everything is copacetic when it comes to the polling places. Apparently, he doesn't think so. This is some of the reasons why you need federal election officials to be able to observe. But I'm going to tell you right now, they're doing it because is the person who's head of the Justice Department, Merrick Garland, is Joe Biden's Justice Department. They don't want Joe Biden's Justice Department to oversee anything because partisanship. Because they don't trust that Joe Biden will be fair. Guess what? I can see something like this also happening if there was a Republican president. Partisanship. Because they have to have this dramatic outrage, even though both parties suppress votes in their own special little way. Let's continue. So the Department of Justice has a nearly 60-year history of addressing Election Day issues to safeguard the voting rights of Black citizens and other communities of color. While some recent efforts to intervene in this process may appear more bark than bite, they still pose a real threat to civil rights enforcement. That's from Edward Casper. So this talks about where they're being sent. So it talks about places in like Maricopa County, Arizona, Fulton County, Georgia. It says where in 2020 became the center of election conspiracy and theories spread by Trump and other Republicans. So it's 86 jurisdictions that the Justice Department will send monitors to today, basically. So monitors will also be sent to Queens in New York, Providence, Rhode Island, Jackson County, South Dakota, Salem, Massachusetts, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Manassas, Virginia, Cuyahoga County, Ohio, Northwest Arctic Borough, Alaska. So the Justice Department monitors will be in St. Louis, 4 jurisdictions in Florida, and 8 jurisdictions in Texas. So they talk about what's going on in Missouri. So they're going to be monitoring. They're trying to monitor in Missouri. And here's in Florida and Texas. It says Texas Secretary of State Jane Nelson said Texas law is clear. The Department of Justice monitors are not permitted inside polling places where ballots are being cast or a central counting station where ballots are being counted. Texas has a robust process of procedures in place and to ensure eligible voters may participate in a free and fair election. Florida Secretary of State Corey Byrd told the Justice Department that Florida law lists who is allowed inside the state's polling places, and Justice Department officials are not included. Byrd said Florida is sending its own monitors to the 4 jurisdictions in which the Department of Justice plans to send staff to, and they will ensure that there's no interference in the voting process. Now, here's my problem, especially here in Florida. You're basically saying that federal election monitors are not allowed in a state where the governor has been sending police to intimidate voters when they decided to sign a petition for particular ballot measures. You mean to tell me that you Floridians are going to trust Ron DeSantis to be able to monitor elections without the federal government also looking at it? Where he used police in order to intimidate voters who signed petitions for Amendment 4. See, this is why we got to change this system. Either we expand parties to multiple parties, or we get rid of parties altogether. It's got to be one or the other. Because the thing is like this partisanship. Partisanship is what's killing us. And this system, it does not allow for actual real democracy. Never mind the fact that we don't have democracy in the workplace. So now you got nincompoops like Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis that are basically telling the federal government you can't come in. And the problem is you also have the federal government, which is ran by people like Joe Biden, that do not put any trust in what they do as far as monitoring. You can't really trust them either. So everybody's lost. Because I sure as hell don't trust Ron DeSantis. But at the same time, do I really trust Joe Biden? No. And if you really don't have that much trust in your election systems, do you really even have a democracy? I would say you don't. So right now, here in Florida, hundreds of thousands and thousands of Floridians are going to polling places, but the federal government doesn't know a damn thing that's going on inside those buildings. But at the same time, can you even trust the federal government? It's like being caught between a rock and a hard place. And who's in the middle? It's us, the people. This is why the primary issue really is money in politics. The primary issue is, if money in politics did not exist, you know how many parties we would have? You would have multiple parties. There wouldn't be two major parties. And the funny part is, when it comes to voter suppression, I've wanted to mention this too. You mean the Democratic Party that that sues to keep the Green Party off the ballot every chance they get? And they want to talk about voter suppression? Make no mistake. When I say both parties suppress, they suppress. Suppress. That's the chamber pot calling the toilet white. Don't you know no good? So I'm telling you right now, like, be prepared for today. And if you're watching this on the rewatch tomorrow, on the 6th, be prepared. Because there are going to be some recounts. There's going to be some lawsuits. There's going to be some, I won. No, I won. I'm just hoping Joe Stein gets the 5%. That's all I'm hoping for. Because these two parties. And either way, I hope you start organizing on the ground. and start building dual power, because that's what we ultimately really need. I'm also going to be watching out for the ballot initiatives intensely here in Florida. You know, I'm going to be on Savvy Sabs later this evening, and I will be, if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my phone to look for the ballot measures, the results for those, because I'm really interested in those. We'll see. But if you are out there voting, make your voice heard, and yeah, stay tuned and grab your popcorn. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.